I got a whole big list of ISA tips, tricks, mistakes, hacks, common questions, whatever triggering word that you want to use to get people to click on the video. That's what I've got. I'm going to start in the only place that we can, with number 1. Have you ever heard of the additional permitted subscription, or APS for short? So if you have a wife, husband, or civil partner who has ISAs, cash, stocks and shares, whatever, and they die, we're starting on a positive today, the value of their ISAs on the day they die becomes an additional permitted subscription. What that means is up to 3 years after the day they die, you get the value of their ISAs on the day they died on top of your 20k annual allowance. It means you can take the value of their ISAs as part of the inheritance that you will receive and just get it into tax efficient accounts. You need to contact each ISA provider individually and tell them that you want to action the APS. And a lot of brokers and banks, from what I've read online, just seem to not really understand the rules here and get a bit confused. So I've linked all the details below for you on how you can go about this. Nothing can take away the pain of losing a partner, but hopefully this can improve your financial security. Obviously, for you to benefit from this, your partner needs to have been paying into ISAs, which brings us on to the second point, not using ISAs. I'm talking specifically about stocks and shares ISAs here. 6% of UK adults currently have a stocks and shares ISA in 2024. So 94% of adults don't use one of the best wealth building tools on the planet. I do need to be clear, for most people, paying into a pension product is likely the best on paper option when it comes to total gains. This is due to the tax breaks when you go in and your ability to control the money when you come out. But this constant meddling that we see with pensions and the rules around them leaves us all uncertain about how and when we can access those funds long term. A stocks and shares ISA is the perfect antidote to that uncertainty, as it gives you control over the most valuable asset that you own, your time. I can access my stocks and shares ISA whenever I want. So just crunching some numbers here. In theory, you could open one at the age of 18, pay in the full 20k a year for 40 years, and achieve an average rate of the global stock market of around 8%. You'd have paid in £800,000 and it'd be worth more than 4.8 million. I could then take all that money out in one chunk, have an absolutely mental night, but not pay a single penny in tax on any of that. I will use my stocks and shares ISA to stop working when I want to, not when the government tells me I can. I think this point is especially powerful for people in the public sector who have generous pensions, but the age at which you can access them can and does change. So I'm going to use my ISA to bridge the gap between when I want to stop and when I can access my pensions. I will then use it in conjunction with my pensions in retirement to draw a large income every year tax-free. A stocks and shares ISA is the most flexible component of our investing arsenal. It's highly liquid, portable, and protected from tax. Take advantage of them. I'm going to leave you a list of the ones that I use below in the description. Next up, let's talk about using the wrong type of ISA for the wrong job. As this chart shows, consistently every year, even in times when interest rates were next to nothing, people chose to open cash ISAs en masse. I don't think this applies to most people watching this here, but in the UK, we have a cash savings problem. People invest in cash, and I think there's just this common misconception around investing in stocks and shares and, the benefits. And I think many think that cash in the bank is safer, when really they forget to consider the long-term eroding effects of inflation. Let's just go through a few of the major adult types of ISAs and when and how to use them. Stocks and shares ISAs are for building wealth long term. The stock market has a long run track record of outpacing inflation over the last 100 years. You can capture that trend by simply buying a global index or maybe an American index, whatever you want, inside of your stocks and shares ISA. Typical timelines here need to be, say, 10 years or more to make sure that you can wait out short-term volatility. It's that sort of timeline that historically has ridden out any sort of turbulence in the market. Cash ISAs are great for things like emergency funds, saving towards a specific short-term or medium-term goal, or maybe you're at a point in your life where you need a large cash balance on hand, for example, in retirement. I will likely have 3 years worth of cash on hand as I approach retirement. I will then live off 1 year in that current year with 2 years in reserve in case the market crashes, so I'm not kicking my portfolio when it's down. In good years, I sell some of my stocks to replenish this cash buffer, sort of like a conveyor belt, if you will. But in bad years, when the stock market doesn't do well, I don't sell stocks, I use up more of the cash buffer over the 3 years. And I can hold this cash inside of an ISA, meaning any interest I generate on that cash is tax-free. Innovative finance ISAs were introduced when peer-to-peer lending boomed. I don't have one, not many people do, to be honest. They become a place where the government sort of throw in niche investments now. I'm not going to discredit them, I'm not going to sit here and say they're pointless. I know that plenty of people watching this will probably use them and find great value in them. It's just not something that I found a reason to have in my portfolio. Lifetime ISAs. So lifetime ISAs are great for buying your first home and great for saving for retirement in some cases. If you're between the ages of 18 and 39, you can open one, and you can pay in up to 4k a year until the age of 50. Every deposit you make, even if it's not the full 4k a year, the government will top up by 25%. So if you put in that full 4k, they'll make it into 5k. You can access the money for two situations: buying your first home, where the bonus helps you get cash towards your deposit essentially. And what's worth noting with this is you can double up in conjunction with a partner's ISA, so the one that they're saving into. So if you're throwing 8k a year into savings across two ISAs, you'll get 2k a year towards the deposit. You can access that money and the deposit through the solicitor when exchanging contracts. Just let them know you're using a ISA. I would use a cash ISA to save for a home myself, so that my deposit isn't subject to the fluctuations in the stock market. Then after that, you can switch to saving for retirement, where you can access the funds at the age of 60. In this case, I'd be using a stocks and shares ISA here to invest for my retirement. I wouldn't be using a cash one. On the point of, is a ISA or a pension a better option when saving for retirement? It depends on your tax rate now and what you expect to be your tax rate when you come to retiring. But there is this point again on flexibility, on having different pots of cash with different rules around them that mature at different times, so you retain control over your time. While we're on the subject of ISAs, let's talk about a mistake the government is currently making. There is a cap on the value of the home that you can buy through a ISA of 450k. That sounds like a lot of money for a first-time buyer, doesn't it? But when you consider the average age of a first-time buyer is now 33, many first-time buyers are established families who need a 4-bed home, not a 2-bed flat. So capping them at 450k traps them, especially if you live down south where, property prices are much higher. As well as this, there is a penalty on the ISA. So if you withdraw your money for any reason beyond buying your first home or the criteria when you hit the age of 60, you get penalised. Let me give you an example. If you pay in 4k, the government gives you a top-up of 1k, you then have £5,000. Take that £5,000 out for a reason that is not allowed, and the penalty is 25%. 25% of 5k is £1,250. You end up with £3,750 back. This means that people are trapped inside of their ISAs, being punished for taking their money out. The government should fix this, and fix it quickly. Increase the cap on housing, or reduce the penalty, so at least if people take their money out, they get back what they put in. Right, let's just settle now the point on how many ISAs you can have. I still see confusion on this point, unfortunately. So in the past, you were only allowed to pay into one ISA of each type each financial year. That meant I could have multiple stocks and shares ISAs with different providers that I'd built up over the years. But whichever one I paid into first in a financial year, that was the one that I had to stick with for that year. But as of this year, those rules changed. You can now pay into as many cash and stocks and shares ISAs as you like each year, as long as you don't exceed the overall 20k allowance across all of your ISAs. Just to clarify as well, this refers to money being paid into the ISA, not the value of the ISA or the gains it makes or the balance inside of it. None of that matters. This is how much you're paying into the wrapper. So you could have, say, a Vanguard account, but you could also pay into a trading 2-on-2 ISA at the same time right now. I think this is great for consumer choice. It allows you to try out new platforms without fully committing for a whole year. So if you just want to stick a couple of quid in and see how it goes, there's nothing special you need to do either. You just open an account, pay your money, and that's it. There are a couple of, other things to consider. Investors in lifetime ISAs are still restricted to subscribing to just one a year. And the same with junior ISAs. You can only subscribe to one of each type each year. I mentioned the 20k overall limit, whereby you can pay a total of 20k into your ISAs each year. But there is a sort of workaround with this. Flexible ISAs. George Osborne introduced these in 2016.
We will introduce a radically more flexible ISA.
But they didn't really catch on, and a lot of the providers that did offer them were expensive. But recently we're seeing major discount brokers offer these flexible ISAs, and they are a lot more attractive. Trading 2-on-2's cash and stocks and shares ISAs are flexible as an example. So what does that mean? A flexible ISA is an ISA that allows you to deposit and withdraw money without affecting your yearly tax-free allowance, as long as you do so within the same tax year. With a normal ISA, cash or stocks and shares, let's say I pay 5k in, then I have 15k left in my allowance for that year. If I need to take out £4,000 for an emergency, I still only have that £15,000 allowance. I've used it up. But with a flexible ISA, if I remove £4,000, I then have £19,000 worth of allowance that I can use. I get back the 4k allowance as such, as long as that 4K goes back into the same ISA within the same financial year. It just stops savers from being penalised for accessing their own money, especially valuable for, say, emergency funds that are held in cash ISAs, or for anyone who sees themselves dipping into their funds temporarily for some reason. Okay, what happens then if you exceed the 20k total allowance? First of all, don't stress out too much. So the rules are that you won't receive any tax relief on the excess payment that you made. It doesn't ruin your whole ISA. HMRC require reporting on deposits from ISA providers. And because they have your national insurance number, it'll be pretty easy for them to check how much you've been paying into your different ISAs over the course of a year. HMRC are then meant to contact you about this if it happens at the end of the tax year or after the tax year has ended. But I see comments online from people saying they exceeded the allowance years ago and were never contacted. I think this is a risky game to play personally, just leaving it and hoping they'll never notice. You can just contact HMRC and let them know and they will sort it out. I'll leave the number below for you and an email because calling them is a test of anyone's will due to their awful hold music. Next up, I want to talk about share lending and how to avoid it. This is common practice where a broker lends shares to a third party in exchange for payment. A lot of people don't like this practice, understandably, especially because it often relates to short selling. But ISA legislation in the UK forbids shares held inside of an ISA from being used for the practice of share lending. Another detail worth talking about is W8BEM forms. I mean, clearly these should be called weight bend forms, shouldn't they? These are not specific to ISAs, but when you open an account, you might be asked to sign one of these weight bend forms and be like, what the hell is this? So the USA have something called withholding tax. Anytime a dividend is paid to someone abroad, they take 30% of it at source. By signing this form, you reduce that from 30% to 15%. It's a special arrangement that the UK has with the US. Lots of countries have rates like this, and I've included a full list below. While on the subject of tax, I often hear people saying ISAs protect you from paying any tax. This is not true, there are still taxes. ISAs protect you from dividends and capital gains tax, big ones, but you still pay the withholding tax on dividends we spoke about before from the USA. As well as that, you pay stamp duty on the purchase of UK listed shares. You'll see this if you buy, say, a UK company. It's charged at 0.5% and it is quite annoying. There's a lot of calls to scrap this tax entirely, as the UK government wants to encourage people to invest in the UK. So by getting rid of that tax, it may promote people to invest there more. But honestly, I'm unconvinced. I think people don't invest in UK companies due to their lackluster performance. America has this withholding tax, but a record of exceptional results over the past decade or so. And no one's sitting there going, I would invest in America, but that withholding tax is a deal breaker to me. I think scrapping stamp duty on UK shares is a start, but it's not a cure for the UK's market's poor performance. Okay, let's go through some quick-fire ones now. If you're opening an ISA, you get the full 4K allowance the year you open it. So you can instantly stick in 4K and get that full 1K bonus. This is useful if you're just finding out about them now, say, or you're at the end of a tax year and you realise the benefit and want to get that full benefit. You can stick in 4K, get £1,000, and then as you cross over into the new tax year, do it again. Essentially getting 8K in and 2K bonus within a 24-hour period. The next one, the new rules allow you to transfer all or part of an ISA to another ISA provider, but it's at the discretion of the broker. I always get questions about junior ISAs, so let's just box off a few of those here as well. Every child in the UK can have a junior ISA and it's theirs, they just can't touch it until they're 18. You can pay up to 9K a year into the junior ISA, which is a mental number to think about really. 9K a year for 18 years at 8% would mean by the time they turned 18, they would have £347,000 worth of tax-free cash that is theirs.
I would be dead.
The challenge with a junior ISA then, in a way, is that point really. At 18, I was a bit of a hot mess. So you need to manage that, just don't tell them it exists maybe. I ask people on my Instagram for questions on ISAs. Come give me a follow if you like. I mainly share stories of me in Tesco's car park. And someone asked if a junior ISA should be invested in stocks and shares or just cash. Let me put it this way. If we have a long time horizon, we invest as long-term stocks outrun inflation and cash does not. No one has more time than a child. At the point a child is born, they are, for a moment at least, the youngest person on the planet. No one has more time to let things compound than they do. I hear people say, I don't want to take a risk with Sebastian's university fund. Holding the money in cash is taking a very certain risk with that money, the risk that inflation is going to eat away the value and the purchasing power of it by the time they get to university. I use Hargreaves Lansdown's junior ISA as it's free And I buy a global index inside of it. I mean, surprise, surprise. I also, on a side note, have a little investment pie set up inside of my stocks and shares ISA for my son. This is the one that I have on Trading 212 because they offer this functionality. And he's picked out a few companies that he thinks are going to go big, massive, as he calls it. Don't laugh at him, let's be honest. Probably the same level of analysis 90% of us are doing before we buy a company, isn't it? I also made him add in a global index fund as a benchmark. We stick a few quid in it out of his pocket money every month, and he's not allowed to touch that money until he's 15. My hope is that it just gets him used to investing and the volatility of the market, just teaches him that this is something that he can do. So when he turns 18, he sees the benefit of it and it's not alien to him. He's down 6% currently, so yeah, it's going great. Next and finally, I want to talk about the British ISA. Proposed by the Conservative government, it was a promise of an extra 5k allowance to invest in UK companies each year. But neither the Conservatives or Labour mentioned it in their manifestos. To me, it feels dead in the water. But if any news surfaces, I'll let you know. I hope you found some use in that video. I want to find a way to answer these kind of questions from time to time if I can, because I get a lot of them and I don't want to ignore people's questions. I'm currently at Boomtown, or I will be by the time you're watching this, hopefully having a great time with my mate. But anyway, I'll see you soon.